So hello everyone and welcome to Brio Digital's Tech for Good podcast. I'm really pleased you've joined us today, and I'm Rob Foley, founder of Brio Digital. And I'm delighted to welcome Adam Cockburn, CTO of Axiologic. How are you doing today, Adam?
I am very, very good. So I'm very pleased to be part of this podcast. Thank you, Rob.
Great. No, you are welcome. So it's the 15th of September and we've just come off the warmest week of the year in the UK. And we're up north in the UK where it's normally cold. So what a great day to be discussing sustainability in tech and also in business, because there's two implications there as well that we're going to cover today. To introduce Adam, Adam has a long career history across multiple industries as a strategic advisor on digital and business transformations. Adam currently works for Axiologic, one of the UK's most respected management consultancy firms, working with substantial public sector organisations and global companies. And Adam is really passionate about tech for good and sustainability and some of the massive benefits we can all reap from a more sustainable future. So today we will discuss sustainability in tech, its broader context in business, and what's needed to deliver sustainable digital services, and also looking through the supply chains up and down. Adam will give a general overview, best approaches, some maybe frameworks for some success and some key challenges as well. So I hope you find it really helpful and informative. So Adam, I'm going to kick off with three questions in one, because it's my podcast and I can do by one. So in its purest sense, what is sustainability? Why is it important? And what do businesses need to do to take it seriously?
Yeah, it's a great question to start with. Why don't we keep it simple? So there's obviously a lot of detail we can get into here, but really simply, I think the way I think about sustainability is reducing impact on the environment. That's the natural environment, the built environment, or maybe the communities that we work within and we serve. And it's important to think about that sustainability and the actions we have both directly, so the things we directly consume or impact, but also indirectly, so through our supply chains, the people we also then in turn work with. So it really is about sustainable practices so that we reduce the impact, the negative impacts on all of those things. Why is it important? Well, actually, I would hope everybody watching this podcast would agree that actually being sustainable is important. We've only got one planet, so we've got to look after it. But actually, what we're finding as well is that actually customer choices are being much more driven by wanting to make the right choices around sustainability. So for businesses, operating more sustainably is now more important than ever. I think the last element, though, as well, is that you've got to take it seriously, because whilst there's not a huge amount of punitive legislation and regulation at the moment, everyone suspects it's coming. So now is the right time to really think about, well, how do I get ahead of the curve a little bit, operate more sustainably, so that when and if some of that stuff comes along, that actually that's not really going to hurt my business.
Cool. Yeah, and obviously, Adam, you work for a management consultancy firm. Are you seeing more of the tenders and the frameworks that Axiologic operate on requesting this information? So it does make business sense to get ahead of the curve now.
It does. I think there's two key trends. I think a lot of the central government buying at the moment very much driving social value and sustainability, and actually, as part of a lot of the tenders that are happening at the moment, quite rightly, the government departments buying services such as ours are asking what contribution we will make, both as an organization, but to help them be more sustainable. And I think what's also happening is in private industry and central government, when they're doing due diligence on suppliers, they are validating sustainability credentials as well.
Brilliant. That's a good starter for 10 then. So what do you think needs to be considered when building a sustainable digital service?
I think as a technologist, it would be easy for me to dive straight into the technology at this point.
Yes.
But actually, I'd like to focus on something slightly different, which is that when individuals, when businesses, when groups of people are thinking about a service, that's the right time to really think about sustainability. I think there's two key things I see again and again, which actually drives on sustainable practices. The first is when you design the best experience that could possibly be offered, are you really driving the most sustainable experience, because the assets that sit behind the experience, whether that's some applications sat in a cloud data center, or it could be the devices that use, are they really using the best use of resources? Are you driving consumption of more resources unnecessarily? So I think that has to be thought of it, and it's a partnership between the folks making the decisions on owning the services, design those services, and the technologists. But I think the other element to really think about is that when you then start designing, okay, here's the experience that we think is a good balance between sustainability and experience and what that service does, how do you then deliver against that? And it's really important to think about, well, is there a risk that we are using the best technology and a lot of older devices cannot support it, which in terms of the people consuming or using those, it's going to drive obsolescence. So that's another million tons of technology that's going to hit the scrap heap early again, which is just not a sustainable practice.
No, it's really interesting. Through my career in technology, I've seen, maybe software engineers that may go off on a tangent with some new tech. Adam, I'm sure you recognize that.
I do.
Putting in the latest and greatest because they want to use it. But actually, Java does work. So maybe more sustainable. So that's a really interesting point. Are there any architectural strategies that companies can employ to make data centers more energy efficient and environmentally friendly? I suppose when we think about sustainability in tech, you would think about data centers first, and a big cost for companies. What considerations should companies consider when selecting cloud providers and then the management thereof thereafter?
Yeah, absolutely. So you're right to call out data centers. There's still an awful lot of organizations that rely on on-premise installations of technology. And in principle, there's nothing wrong with that. But small-scale data centers, it's really hard. They don't have the economy of scale to make them truly sustainable unless it's a really micro data center. When I mean micro, I mean maybe a PC under somebody's desk, and actually it's quite easy to manage cooling, water consumption, etc. But data centers themselves are very much big consumers of resources. So a lot of the providers of managed services hosting really are looking at how are they switching from non-renewable to renewable electricity? How are they optimizing cooling? What about the design of their facilities? So there's passive cooling rather than active cooling. So there's a lot happening in the physical space, but really the game changer is moving stuff into cloud data centers, which are truly massive on scale. But what that means is it allows them to be built from the ground upwards, thinking about sustainable practices. And all of the big providers, Microsoft Azure, AWS, are starting to build in sustainability best practice, not just at how they host data centers, so provide the cloud to customers, but also when customers operate in the cloud, what best practice looks like. I think the most important part, though, is that it's recognizing that it's not just for the provider to do it. There's a big role for every customer consuming those hosting services to think about, how do I make my hosted service efficient as well? So it really is a partnership, and a lot of organizations will seek partners that help them do that. It's really important to choose a partner that can help you implement and operate those services, hosted services, in a sustainable way as well.
Yeah, that's important, I think, because obviously, companies can have the best intentions, can't they, about their sustainable, policies and agendas, and I think they've done the right thing. Yep. And then these services can be outsourced, so it's really important to follow that supply chain, isn't it?
It is.
So following on, how can startups and smaller tech companies adopt sustainability, these practices from the outset? Maybe considering potential resource limitations. How would you address maybe the challenges of balancing a short-term financial goals with long-term sustainability?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think from what I've seen, 10, 15 years ago, making choices to be much more sustainable or operate much more environmentally responsible was more expensive. Yeah. Everything you would consume would have a 20, 30, 40, 50% price premium over the standard price point. But I think now those prices are very much coming leveling off with non-sustainable. Yes, you can still save money. So it is much more easier for startups, scale up, small businesses to make those choices. But I think it's the choices which is the critical part. Every time business thinks to consume and operate their supply chain, add a new supplier, start working with a new partner, etc., it's really thinking about, well, how are they impacting the environment? Are they going to contribute to my sustainability objective? Are you even talking about your sustainability objectives when you're talking to them? So it's a simple conversation and driving those choices about who you work with, who you consume things from. And it's not just the direct consumption. We talked earlier about it being the indirect part. So for instance, if you're providing an event that publicizes your business, will the caterer, for instance, take spare food and give it to a food charity, or is it going in the bin? It's those kinds of considerations that I think every small company can make. And it takes a little bit of time, there's a little overhead, but in the long run, it will contribute.
Yeah, I think when you see these startups now, the sustainability startups really shine through. You know, when you see it on the social media, etc. For me, it just feels like a competitive advantage to be sustainability first.
Agreed.
Okay, well, Adam, we can't do a podcast without mentioning AI. It's just, you just can't do it at all anymore. How can AI, data analytics, provide and maybe harness some insights for sustainability efforts, or maybe examples of other innovative technologies that can successfully reduce environmental impacts?
Yeah, so the interesting point about AI, a lot of the early wins with AI is very much harnessing AI to rapidly do things that humans can't, or would struggle with, or would take longer. Does that really deliver sustainability objectives? Maybe in some cases, but actually it's more in real innovative fields like medical imaging, for instance, where AI is a massive difference, or in genomic sequencing where new patterns are being identified, etc. I think actually there's a whole host of technologies around that space, machine learning, automation, robotics, which actually are all contributing to organizations being able to make their processes more efficient. And of course, if their processes are more efficient, they're consuming less resources. So there is definite and increasing contribution to sustainability through those automation technologies. And I think the other critical part is that when we think about harnessing those new technologies, again, we've got those cloud providers which offer those services as a commodity. So you might not get those real cutting edge services that allow you to do those medical examples, but do you know what? Being able to plug in machine learning, robotics, and automation technologies into your processes is easier than ever. And they are letting small organizations those in a way when previously maybe the price point was only achievable by larger organizations. I think one thing I would say though is, even though cloud is a game changer to make this, it's very easy to just build uncontrollably.
Yeah, and the costs just go up and up. Yeah.
So there still needs best practice around governance, around being really clear what it is, tidying up after yourself, housekeeping, all of that. So even though you're able to do even more, sometimes that doesn't always help, and there is a need to just keep a lid on it.
Yeah, rein the techies in.
I can't encourage that as a techie, but yes.
Right, so moving on a little bit. So what role does policy and regulation play, Adam, in promoting sustainability within the tech sector? What further regulatory measures might be needed for the future? Is it needed? Can the private sector do this on its own? Do we need government support? Who's leading it?
So I think, I mean, we could talk at length about the role of policy and legislation in guiding and changing societal behavior. You know, do you travel? Do you consume? What choices the general public make? But I think maybe focusing in on businesses, I think there are a lot of businesses still waiting for the government to set out some rules, back it by legislation, etc., to set out a minimum standard. Then the decision gets easier for businesses, or we have to, because there's legislation. My personal view is I don't think that's going to happen anytime soon. I think the risk is that when it does come, it'll also come with some kind of punitive taxation on businesses. So I think probably what's most important is to for businesses to be inquisitive about what it means for them and to get started and set the bar internally. You made your point about making it a differentiator, make the choices, put it at the heart of your business and operate sustainably from the outcome. And I think then if and when this stuff comes along, businesses should be in a really good position. And I think we see a lot of evidence that where there's a lot of startups and small businesses really actively interested in B Corp certification. And for those that aren't aware of B Corp certification, that's some sustainability standards that businesses can be certified in. They're quite tough, but also they set the bar very high. So if a business is really committed to being sustainable and might not know how to do it, want a framework to do it, B Corp is there for anybody.
No, yeah, Adam, I totally agree. So B Corp is a process that we at Brio Digital have been going through. We operate in the tech for good sector, which is more of a value choice for us as recruiters who are maybe aging in the years. And we felt B Corp for us was a value decision and a business decision as well. We saw it as a differentiator in the market, as a technical recruiter. And I would encourage any company that's even remotely thinking about sustainability is to go through the process with B Corp. It can be long, but it really gets you thinking. I think about your supply chain up and down. What clients do we want to work with? What suppliers do we want to work with? How are we going to treat our staff? What policies have we got in terms of waste, remote working? It really does get you thinking across the whole gambit. And I know this is sustainability in tech, but really for me, it's sustainability in business, isn't it?
It is.
And I think if businesses are the biggest consumers in essence. So I'd encourage anybody to go through it. From what I remember, because it's been an 18-month process, it's free to start that process. So I'm a big advocate of B Corp. Brilliant. So moving on, we sort of talk about businesses, but what role do we as consumers play, Adam, in promoting sustainability in the tech sector? How can we make informed choices to support eco-friendly products and services? I suppose maybe an example, in the tech for bad world, in gambling, you're going onto some of these sites and there are videos everywhere, noises coming at you. Is there a world where we would maybe, when we consume these services, we can say, whoa, this is really quite full on. This doesn't look a very sustainable company. Is it that obvious in terms of the UI, or actually maybe they've computed it so it is sustainable?
I think there's a lot in this topic. It's interesting looking at gambling because, of course, they use a huge amount of intelligence to incite and persuade people to behave in the way that they want them to behave, etc. But I think therein lies the key thing: behavior and choice. Yeah. And I think that is the primary thing I think consumers need to really think about, is when I am making a choice to consume resources. Whether it's at home, whether it's making decisions when you're kind of out and about, or whether you are in your daily role, in your business, etc. And I mean, I'm quite lucky because I've got a degree in environmental science, so I've got a really strong background in all of these topics. But and a lot of people don't have that. But actually, there's a lot of resources on the web that will help people better understand. Actually, where is the standard? Where is the waste? What is best practice, etc. So I think being informed and informing yourself about this is the most important first step. And then, of course, play that out through the choices you make, and ask questions of people that you're going to buy stuff from. It's really important. And so, for instance, if you are buying something, whether it's for your family or whether it's as a business, ask the question and says, well, where's this come from? Is it a sustainable resource? A big topic was about palm oil in a lot of topics, which, that view that doesn't come from sustainable resources. Does it contain palm oil? A simple question. So ask as many questions as possible. And don't overlook, actually, do small business contribute to the local community? That's as important as the environmental impact. I think Axiologic, like Brio, very much believe in tech for good. And we recognize that people who buy and consume our service, but people who want to come and work for us, want to work for organizations that are making those right choices as well. There's a really interesting framework, which is quite an old framework that's been updated, that helps people think about, the choices they can make. It's called the 7 Rs. So the 7 Rs are rethink, refuse, reduce, reuse, repair, regift, recycle, in that order. Start at the left, but it's really trying to get people to think differently about consuming resources. So rethink, do you really need to consume the resources? Could you do it slightly differently? Next one is refuse. You could just say, look, this isn't the right thing to do. It's not sustainable. Reduce. So reduce the impact. So you might decide that you can't refuse. You've had a good rethink, but actually you're going to do it. But is there a way to reduce the impact? So the 7 Rs are really, really useful in guiding individuals, but also businesses about their sustainability footprint.
Right, brilliant. I think that's a really good overview. Adam, I mean, how can Axiologic help companies embarking on a more sustainable future? I know you mentioned the framework. How would you progress this with companies that were interested in taking this further?
Yeah, I think there's 3 core areas that we can help and have helped organizations as they try and navigate this. I think, we primarily help people with their digital operating model and how they do be more digital, how do they digitize their business, etc. And I think that's the first real part, which is as you automate your business, and you've got to think about how you simplify everything so that you're consuming less resources for the same or better outcome for your customers or your service users. So that whole end-to-end design, the whole ecosystem, and how you make change, that whole automation and simplification is a critical part we help people with. And it's ultimately they can do a lot more with less resources, and they're also much more sustainable. And we also contribute to skills growth in those organizations and their communities. I think the other thing to think about is maybe a more direct impact one, which is that as you build out digital services, you've got to make it easier for people to engage digitally. Because, of course, if people are engaging digitally, they can engage anywhere. So they don't have to travel to consume resources. That's a huge impact on emissions and CO2. But actually, not relying on paper, moving to digital methods, that also reduces the impacts, the processing, etc. So the critical part is that we also help organizations really envision how you do service designs. How might people engage really effectively digitally? It isn't easy all the time, but actually we've helped people again and again. The last one is really then thinking about that technology footprint. So those cloud providers, we talked about it's easy to build. But actually, one of the things that we've helped a number of clients think is how do they get the best out of the hyperscalers, but make sure that they're not consuming any more resource than they need to. And that can be a very complex assessment, analysis, and set of tasks to do. But the prize is quite huge as well. With one government department, we were able to save them almost £1 million a year. That's money they didn't need to spend with a hyperscaler. And actually, the services weren't impacted. They're still the highest level that they needed. And that was money that could then reinvest in other services, again, delivering more benefits.
Brilliant. Adam, that's been fantastic. No, thank you so much. I think it's been a great overview. I think we've covered a hell of a lot there. Maybe skim through with some deep dives in areas. But that's the idea of this podcast. It's to give people an overview, give them a starting point, etc. So if you want to find out more on how Adam and Axiologic can help you for a more sustainable future, we'll include a link to Adam's profile and the Axiologic website on wherever you're listening to this podcast or on YouTube. Please like and subscribe for future podcasts. We've got some really interesting topics coming up over the next few months, which I'm really excited about. Latest in health tech and the tech for good sector. So thank you very much for listening, and thanks again, Adam.
Brilliant. Thank you, Rob.
Cheers, Adam.